series. I'm Ben Long, one of the co-hosts, and I'm an English teacher, a book reviewer, and I write for several different horror websites. And I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Janine.
Hello, I am also a writer and podcaster and reviewer and editor and anything else that you can think of. And happy to be here today talking to someone I've been able to share a TOC with as well. So very exciting.
Awesome. And today we are talking to Stephanie Ellis from Silver Shamrock. Before we get into our questions, Steph, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I had everything planned out and now my mind's gone blank. So yes, I am a woman of a certain age with brain fog. I've been writing for several years now. I didn't start early like a lot of people. They always said, oh, I knew I wanted to be a writer from a certain age. No, I didn't. I was a reader. I just read anything and everything. Coming to horror was later on again. So again, not so normal. I started writing several years ago, mainly poetry actually, when I was working way back, and it was like protests. If I didn't like someone, I'd write a poem about them. And I shared it with a little team of workers. It's our way of dealing with things. But I wrote short stories, sent them out, got rejected. I think Theresa Derwin is the one, you might have come across her in the community. She published my sort of first story pretty much. I kept writing for Night's Watch Press, sent stories out, rejected. I am still being rejected, by the way. It never stops. And in the past year or so, it's stepped up since I got involved with Silver Shamrock. That's been a real turning point. So, yeah, here I am.
Awesome.
And I've probably missed out lots of things, but I'll sneak that back in later.
No, that works, because I really was going to end up trying to focus, specifically on your career as a writer. So you've kind of started sharing some of that. So you say you started, writing protest poetry of sorts, and now it seems, from a lot of what you write is kind of more into the horror genre, and all the various subgenres. So what kind of led you in that direction?
When I realised I could do it, because I read dark books, but I never read horror fiction too much, not until my 20s, I would say. When I was growing up, I read anything and everything, but I read a lot of Dickens when I was young, about 11 or 12, and he is quite dark with his characters. It's a very dark Victorian world. And then I had this Russian phase, and they are very depressing people. So again, there's this darkness there, and it took me that way. But there was a call in a writer's magazine. This was some years back. This was back with Theresa Derwin with Night Watch Press, and they had this call for a story, and it's something to do with potatoes. It was supposed to be a horror anthology about potatoes. And I had no idea about it at the time, but I'd done a short story writing course with Writing Magazine, and they said, you can write, but you're not magazine material. You're not people's friend. You're not Woman's Realm or anything like that. Your best bet is competitions. And I thought, I don't want to be entering competitions because you have to pay all the time. Mm-hmm. So I saw Theresa's call and sent it in, and it was a story called Death is Not a Potato. And I still haven't placed it anywhere. It's about people in Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad, and they were eating pretty much anything. So yeah, potatoes are involved, but that got rejected, but she liked my writing. So she said, submit something else when there's another call. So I actually looked up Night's Watch Press. I didn't do my homework, by the way. They always say, do your homework, look up people. And I hadn't done, but I looked it up and I thought, oh, this is horror. And she was doing a call for, I think it was called The Last Supper, and you had to write a story about meals going wrong, dining places going wrong. And I did one called The Last Diner, and I can still remember looking up meals on YouTube. You would have cheese with maggots in, which is actually banned. It's a Sicilian thing. I can't remember what it's called, but it's banned by the EU. There was live sushi or tentacles moving, things like that. And so I put them all in the story, and I just really enjoyed it. And I sent it in, and she accepted it. And I thought, oh, I'm okay with this. And I started from there. And yes, I did start to read more horror properly then. but I have such fun introducing that chill factor, that little creep moment. I thought, yeah, this is me. It's my happy place, and I like that. So here I am.
It's awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit about your latest release with Silver Shamrock, The 5 Turns of the Wheel? Obviously, no spoilers or anything, but just a bit about it and how the story came about.
That was a short story I wrote. I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago now. There was an anthology called Horror in Bloom, and they wanted stories set in the spring, and I thought I'll try folk horror. And I wrote a story. When people look at the countryside and they look at Morris dances, they see men waving hankies around and little bells, and it's all very airy-fairy, and it just seems very twee. And I thought, well, I'll take that but change it. And I'd grown up in the countryside, so I created these 3 people. They're like a mama's troupe, but they do Morris dancing. But I looked up rapid dancing online, which is like a blade with 2 handles. And if you watch it on YouTube, I don't know if you've ever looked it up, but you watch some of these dancers, and there are these men all holding handles with these blades, and they're doing somersaults over it, and they're weaving in and out. And there's one point where they form a pentagram. And I thought, well, what if somebody's actually in the middle of that pentagram with blades around their neck? You know, you can slice it off. So I created that story, and Tommy, Betty, and Fiddler came about, and I gave them those names. They're very innocent sounding names. I remember someone had commented that they found the names a little bit irritating. I thought they probably don't know why I called them that. And it's very much that you have something innocent, but you want to subvert it a bit. And Tommy's a basic name. Fiddler was just because he played the fiddle in rural society. I mean, even in Wales today, if you've got a certain career, then people know you by what you do. You know, you buy the post or something like that over in Wales, or if you, as I say, play the fiddle, you're Fiddler. Then Betty was, they would always have a man dressed as a woman for comedy. And I created that. They were normally called Mollies, but I thought I don't like the name Molly. Molly was all right, but it didn't fit. So I called him Betty. And I just had such fun with them going into this village and creating mayhem, basically killing off the townies who'd come into the village, whilst everybody else who lives there was okay. I thought I didn't want to leave that, and I wanted to create a story with them in and see how far they could go. But I needed the rituals to have a purpose. So I created a part of the world with villages, with this little village at the centre, Cropso, and with a pub in the middle. And a lot of my stories feature pubs. Well, I grew up in one. The cider house was the one that was in the middle of nowhere, and it just sold cider. And I thought, well, that can be the setting with these people. But then the rituals, these days people talk about nature and Mother Nature and how there's this battle between what we do to the planet. But I also took it from the perspective of the people who live in the countryside a little bit, so that there's this element of us against them all the time. When people go to the countryside, they want it to be perfect. It's an idyll, but it's not. There's a lot of mud and blood and all sorts of things going on. And so I thought, well, I'll bring in modern problems. So women's problems especially. You go on about Mother Nature, and I forgot what I was going to say now. Let's talk about Mother Nature. I wanted her to take a central role in this, and with women being the centre of a society, they always seem to take the flak for a lot of things, but women suffer, and it's whether you're giving birth, whether you're getting old, women always seem to carry the can for something. And I thought, well, if they are in these positions in the rituals, then they are going to go through this suffering throughout the year at different times, but they needed to fight back. And I wanted them to have a platform and fight back, but you needed a central character. So I brought one in because one of the 5 turns involves loss. And this particular person is going to go through a loss. That's about the only spoiler. But the part of it is that was my story. That was a bit of reality in there. So it's very much about a made up world, but very real suffering of women sort of fed into that. and then how they react with that suffering, how they get over that. And that's basically where it is. So it's a story of a woman going through these rituals, fighting back, and then seeing whether the norm in this area, Tommy, Betty and Fiddler, whether they're going to carry on or whether they're going to be put in their place, and that the women will actually sort of say, hang on, you know, we do this now, you don't tell us what to do. And that's effectively what I was trying to do. And I've probably completely lost the thread there, but there you go. It's really hard to talk about without giving spoilers, though. You can't.
Yeah, and I've been reading the book, and so I have some insights, some background. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to ask about this, but like I don't want to give do spoilers. So I was trying to be careful about my questions. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I'm really interested in the folklore subgenre. That's one that's very fascinating to me. And I know you said this was a short story first, and you're like, oh, I'll try to write in this genre. And that was a few years ago, and you've developed from short story to novel. But when I'm reading the book, the whole all of the rituals in it, and the 5 turns, and the way that it's constructed, and Umbra, and kind of all of these elements seem very, very well thought out, very planned, very realistic in a way. And so I was curious, how much of that, all of this world, is your own creation versus like research that you've done. Like you mentioned, the guys with the blades and mollies, things like that. How much research versus your own kind of imagination went into this?
Parts of it were research, like the dance itself, the rapper dance. That's real. Most of Umbra is my own. I made it up. I keep giving characters names that I can't pronounce. It's Whale, Hweol. I think I said it right. It's an Old English name, or Old English word, and it actually means wheel. So I called it. I looked for elements of reality, and then I change it. Mm-hmm. So all the rituals themselves, whether you're being burned or whether you're being chopped up into the soil or dropped from a great height, they're mine, because I wanted something different. The hardest part is when you look up folk traditions, a lot of them involve fire, a lot of them involve bonfires and things like that. And I thought, well, I do want a number of rituals to give structure to the book, but it couldn't always be fire. You can only burn people so often. So I wanted to try something a little bit different. And I thought about the different elements of air. Well, you've got fire, you've got air, water and earth, and I put those in there. And then, someone did say, why did you call it the 5 turns and not the 6 turns? Because there is a 6th turn. But that's the one that I said during the book, that it's the one you don't mention. So that's why I didn't call it the 6th turn. But it was, a lot of it was my own imagination. But now, going back to Diabolica Britannica, with the story that I wrote in there, We Plough the Fields and Scatter, I actually looked up a real tradition, Plough Monday, and then thought, what can I do with that? And I've enjoyed the world so much, but you can only make up so much. So I've got a book on the English folk year, and I look at the traditions in that and see, right, what can I do? I did a number of short stories set in the same world, and I found one, I think it's up north, it's called the Haxey Hood. And it's like one of these bizarre games of football with 2 villages against each other, and they just throw this ball. Well, actually, it's a length of leather between them, and they charge across the countryside with it. And there's all sorts of bizarre traditions in this country like that you can think, oh, well, I could maybe kill somebody here, or make someone disappear, or there's so much like that. So there is that element in some of my later writing, but in the 5 turns, it was very much mine. And I'm doing the follow-up, but if I say anything about that, it'll give spoilers to the first. But I'm trying to make up another ritual in that one. So there are rituals. There's something I've called I've created a place called the layerings, and it's like layer upon layer of reality. And then these people are manipulating. If you just pull it apart, then you slice through the bodies and they just disintegrate. And I thought, oh yeah, that's quite good. So it's just It's just great fun.
I love it.
Yeah.
As much blood as possible.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, with an underlying moral, though, I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so touching on something which you just mentioned about that one of the female characters in the story experiences loss. You've candidly spoken about in a blog post as well about miscarriage.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's something that should be addressed through stories and books rather than being swept under the carpet?
I think it is, because everybody talks about family, they talk about pregnancies, they talk about the children, but there was some statistics somewhere where they said 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. But have you talked to 1 in 4 women who said, oh, this has happened to me? And then recently over here, I heard that the government is looking at giving 2 weeks leave now, I think paid leave, to those women who've suffered loss, because at the minute, if you have a miscarriage, then basically that happens and you carry on as normal. I was lucky. I mean, at the time, I wasn't working. I was a stay-at-home mum with younger kids. I had 2 young kids then. You know, this would have been our 3rd. But so they kept me occupied. But if I'd been working, I'd have been expected to have gone back and you just carry on. It's one of those things where they say nothing has happened, but it has. To me, that I just told my family that I was expecting again. That was a life, that was a child to me. Yeah. And the hardest part of that was literally within the day of me telling people that, you know, that was happening. I was actually losing it. And I dealt with the loss quite well. I think I'm quite a pragmatist, but I think the violence of that loss and the treatment I received, it still makes me angry. And that fed into the 5 turns. People might say, oh, there's a lot of blood, and the 5th turn is brutal, or when Megan experiences her own loss, it's violent. But that's the way it was with me. 1 minute you are expecting a child, you know, you're getting, your body's changing, and the next day you're not. And it was even less than a day for me. And you talk to people and they said, oh, their loss was over a period of time. I don't know whether I prefer that, because it would have been gentler on the body, but then you've got a longer time to dwell on it. Or the violence with me, and I was hemorrhaging, and not knowing you're hemorrhaging, but having people are supposed to be looking after you, not my husband, I should say, but the medical profession, just asking, you know, shall we wait for office hours? This would have been several hours later. Or to be waiting when you get into hospital, wait for an hour to be seen, wake up on a hysterectomy ward, to be left on that day, and to be told every time you go to the loo, you've got to take a dish with you to hold the blood as it comes out of you, so they measure the loss. And the only time you come and talk to you is when you see this little form in the dish, and you know, because I knew that last one, I'd had cramps. And I went to the toilet, and you bring back this dish and there's a mass there, and you know, and then they come and pull the curtains around and talk at you and send you to a scan. And I just, it's just something that is very real to me. I was talking to my youngest for the first time recently about it. I can't remember what brought it up, but I went through it and I got choked up at the end. And I thought, this is years ago. I mean, she's 19, she'll be 20 soon. And it would have been the one before her. I mean, if that one had lived, she, you know, obviously we wouldn't have had the youngest. But it was just such, I don't know whether you call it post-traumatic stress disorder. Perhaps it might be that. But the way it's just in there, you know, I can't get rid of that. But I put my anger, and I think some of the violence, and people talk about, yes, there's a lot of blood in 5 turns, but that is the relationship of women to blood. Their life pretty much is dictated to by blood in their bodies, or by its absence, because there are women who can't have periods, can't have children, and so that's a whole other side of it. But it was just a bit of a nightmare. But people should talk about it more. there should be more support places to go. That is changing. I mean, with Twitter, I'll retweet the Miscarriage Association occasionally. But when after it happened to me, and people would come up and say quietly, "Oh, this happened to me, this happened to me." Some people told me about their stillbirths, which would be even more horrendous. To give birth to a dead child, it's just horrible. You need time to deal with that, and you need the professions to. I mean, when it's a stillbirth, I think maybe you do get more support because it's something visible. When it's something that nobody's seen, that it's within your body, they think, oh, it doesn't really matter, but it does. And I wish more people would talk about it, be open about it. It's a bit like I do on a lighter side. It's a bit like I do about the menopause side of things now, because I'm going through that as well. I'll share my hot flushes with anybody.
Well, that's it. It's, because it happens, doesn't it? There's no point denying these things, and the more that it can become just something that people talk about, hopefully it will help people that have gone through it and been like, oh Christ, part of it is because people always feel uncomfortable talking about it, and so people don't talk because they don't think that other people don't know what to say. So it just gets, when you don't know what to say, then the silence grows. It's like when you experience a death or anything horrible like that. People go quiet because you don't know what to say, and we're all guilty of that. It's just really hard. But if you know that someone's just going to listen, that's all you really need, somebody to listen, and you don't have to say it at that time. You just know that you've got somebody to go to and to talk to. I've had friends. There was a friend of mine. She died. She's a close friend. She died a few years back of liver cancer. She lost her child at 18 months. He had meningitis, and the doctor sent them home. And then in the night, she told me that he was screaming and it was septicemia, and he died. But whenever I went round to her house, she had his shoes on the stairs and they never moved. And she asked me, is it okay if she could talk about him? I mean, that was your child. So even if they're not with you, you want to talk about them. If you lost a child, you want to talk about that. There was another friend we lost. We were all 29 and he had a brain tumour. You see his mum. You want to, she said, is it okay to talk? Yes, but people think that they can't because it will make you feel uncomfortable. But you shouldn't have to, you shouldn't have to. People should just listen. I'm happy to listen to people. Even if I can't say the right thing, I will listen. I'll just make cups of tea for people. And
Right.
Thank you very much for being so open about it as well. And you never know, there might be someone listening to this that it helps. So as much as we can talk about this, there might be someone that we can do some good for. So thank you. Okay, over to you, Ben.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate as well, just really quickly. I mean, obviously that's not something that I have gone through, but I know others that have. And what you were saying about, the awkwardness and the conversations and things like that, and just listening is such a powerful thing for it. And so because you feel like you have that support, right? And so myself, I'm talking to people and I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do, but I know I could listen. I know I can show empathy. And sometimes, that's enough. And so just want to reiterate that as well, that I think that can be really powerful. And also, I mean, the blog post, I know it spoils some stuff from the book. So guys that are listening or watching this, go read the book first because it's really good and you should do that. But then go back and read the blog post as well because it's just really powerful and worth reading, I think.
The other reason I put up the blog post is I've noticed there's a lot of things on Twitter and various social media about what you're allowed to write about these days. And sometimes they say, oh, you can't write about this because you haven't experienced it. You can't write about that. And I think we've got to be very, very careful. Otherwise, what's the point of writing fiction? We're writers. We should be allowed, with respect, with responsibility, research, whatever. Yes. So be very careful. But I didn't want somebody to come back and say, you're writing about this. Nobody would ever say that or do that or that would happen. And I thought, this was my situation. So yes, I'm writing about it because it was me, and I'm allowed to. When I know you had Kenneth Kane on the other week, he edited this. He's edited a couple of times, and yes, he is a monster. But when we came to that bit that dealt with the loss, and I put some of the words in there that were used with me, and he said surely they wouldn't use that, they wouldn't be like that, and I said, well, yes, they were. And so I kept that in. I wasn't going to change it. It might have felt unrealistic to some people, but for me, that was my reality. So I thought I'm going to keep it in there. So I usually say yes a lot to Kenneth. but then I save my battles for the bit, but it's never really a battle. I keep the bits that I want, and it works out well. So yeah, that's partly why I did the post, to show that there was truth behind it, and it was my truth, my situation. If other people realise that, there's lots of women out there who've been through it, and it's not all just a very softly loss. It can be quite violent, which is scary. Then it might give them a bit more information if something similar is happening to them.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of your short stories, but before we do that, I was kind of thinking, since you mentioned earlier on that the Five Turns of the Wheel was a short story first, and now it is a novel, I was just curious kind of what that process was like. How did you kind of, take that from short story form and add in all of this other stuff? Did you add in characters and scenes? I'm sure you added some to build it out, or did you kind of take, I guess that's, my question, what all was added? How did you make that transformation kind of happen?
Oh God, that's lost in the midst of time now.
Okay.
I think I created the rituals first. I sort of tried to think of ways to kill people. And then as I sort of created those, and I'd got this environment. What usually happens when I write is I've got an image of a scene or a person, and then I just start, it's like a film in my head, so then I just start setting them off down the road and have them walking in, and then it just starts to build from there. So it's not there is not a lot of planning with me. The short story gave me the idea and those characters, but I am very much a pantser. And I have tried to plan, and it doesn't work with me. So I usually do NaNoWriMo in November, and I write, and quite often when I've taken that work away, I'll look at it and then I'll write a bit more and think that should be at the beginning, and I just keep moving bits around, and then I'll go back to the beginning and read it and think, oh no, something else should have happened. So it's not linear, it's more round and round in circles. It's strange, but there is no planning. But a short story will give me the core of the idea. In this case, it gave me the people and one particular ritual. And then I just start to go out from there and just let the characters do their thing and tell their story. The follow-up, which I'm working on at the minute, again, that was written last November, and I've just spent the past few days restructuring what I'd done in November and moving things to the beginning that were at the end. So I don't like losing things, and it's got quite a good story to it, I think, now. So in a few days I'll be able to just carry on writing. I have written a couple of other shorts that I think went into longer stories. Bottled was a short story, and then I developed that as well. But I'll write the main outline of the book. I'll write the story through, and then I go back through and do what I call colouring in. Each chapter I treat in a way like a short story, and it might only be a few thousand words, and I'll go through and then I'll go back and add in the layers, because I'll add in the emotion or the atmosphere. And whenever I'm in each chapter and I've got the main character, I'll stop and I'll be thinking, what can I write here? But you have to think, what are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we feeling? And that's what I always call it, colouring in, just adding the layers in, and then the word count grows from there. So there's no real plan to it. It just happens. But once I'm in that world and I'm writing, That's it. They just, characters tell their own story pretty much. If I try and plan it, then it goes, they won't let me do that. They go off their own way. Usually about 3/4 of the way through, I get an idea of the ending. I'll go, oh yeah, that's it. And then that's where I'm headed. But it doesn't normally happen at the start. It's just these characters doing their thing, and we'll see what happens. That's the way I normally go.
Okay, very cool. That's very interesting. So you've written a lot of short stories. Do you have any that you hold as like your favorites that you've had or had the most fun writing, or even just, like anthologies and magazines that you were in that you were like, oh, that's so awesome, I got into this particular, publication?
There are a few. There's a favorite story of mine that was in an anthology ages ago, The Pun Book of Horror, with Teresa Derwin. And that's just because of the fun of it. It was a spoof of The Woman in Black. And it's called The Woman in Slacks. And it's about this lawyer, like the Woman in Black, who goes off to this place which is haunted by a woman who wears very bad 70s brown polyester trousers. And apparently in a previous life, when she was alive, she tried to get her boyfriends or her partners to wear these trousers, but they were hideous and they wouldn't, so they all dumped her. So she dies, and she comes back and she tries to get this lawyer to wear the trousers. And I just had such fun. They were comfort fit, by the way, elasticated waistband, comfort fit. But it's really good fun. That's one I've really enjoyed. The one that was a real turning point, and I was really pleased to get into, was Fiends in the Furrows, Nose Touch Press. I wrote The Way of the Mother, which is a short story set in the Five Turns world. So I've been working on the book, and I wrote the story and sent it in. And that one, I think that gave me, I got 50 quid or something for it. But it gave me the chance to join the HWA, and that was a big setup.
Yeah.
And then from that, I got into their online writing group and wrote with Mona Lawrence, and they all pulled my work to pieces, but it meant I stepped up a level. I got used to being critiqued. And so, so it took me up a level from there. And then I think Milking Time was a little post-apocalyptic story. I wrote Flame Tree Press. That was my big sale. The interesting thing about that one is that I did offer it up for critique with some people at the time, but I'd been critiqued a lot, and I was starting to get a bit iffy about my writing and thinking, was it any good? Because people were saying, well, you should do this and you should do this. And that particular story, I thought, well, actually, I like it as it is. So I let them critique it, but I sent it off without taking into account what they were saying. I hadn't got their feedback. I sent it away because I thought, I like it. I got their feedback, and they said, well, you should change this and you should change this. And then I got the acceptance.
Yay!
So, yes. So I think if you do go for critiques, keep the numbers few. Don't have more than a couple, especially for a short story, because otherwise you start to doubt yourself and it can destroy your confidence. So there is a place for them, but you do have to be very careful. And I'm a lot more careful these days. But I wouldn't have been without that experience at all, because it really helped raise the writing. And then because I got into Silver Shamrock, I got into Midnight in the Pentagram as well. And that was another big thing. So I was really pleased about that. So last year, with the post sales and with Fiends in the Furrows, that was it for me. That was really, really good exposure, good pay. And I thought, finally, I'm doing something right. The one in Midnight in the Pentagram, I had fun with that because many years ago, I'm getting on a bit now, I did the Open University. I did a degree with them, and in the first year we did a literature module as part of the foundation course, and I listened to the Bacchae, which is a Greek play by Euripides, I think, and it's where this woman, literally, she's a disciple of Dionysus, and all the women go off up to the mountain and they all get drunk. No men are allowed, and her son follows, and she doesn't see him as her son. She's made to see him as a lion, and she rips him to pieces. and it was done on a tape recording, and it was all these women screaming and shouting and this drumming going on, and that's always stayed with me, and I thought I'd like to do a story based on that. And so I did a satanic version for the Midnight in the Pentagram. So if you look at some of them, if you look at Uncle Dion in there, he is actually Dionysus. And the son, I can't remember the Greek name, but he is the one, I gave a shortened version of the name, and he is the one who was torn apart in the play. So for me, it's just a way of, you know, doing the story I'd always wanted to do, and it came out quite well, I thought. So yeah, so last year those were stories I enjoyed. And Diabolica, yes, Diabolica as well. That was amazing, being the same as Tim Levin and Adam Neville, as you know, Janine, and Ramsey Campbell commenting on all our stories. I thought, yeah, it's nice to know that people further, you know, at the top of the tree effectively have read your work and are commenting quite nicely. And there was a little tweet the other week from Jonathan Mabry, and he's actually read my book. He's read 5 Turns and he liked it. And I thought, yes. And that means a lot to know that little people down here are being read by others up there, you know, because I still feel that I'm very much a new person. I'm still serving my apprenticeship. I've still got a long way to go, and I'll still keep writing. I want to write just because I came to it late. It doesn't matter if you didn't start writing when you were 10 or 15 or selling stories to your mates. That wasn't me, and I think that a lot of people, when they are invited to interviews and things and they are asked about their horror credentials, they think, well, what can I say, because that wasn't me then. I mean, I was reading Enid Blyton when I was little. Yes, I didn't read Goosebumps, but I read a lot. I read all sorts. I just read anything and everything. But I don't think that should invalidate who you are or what you want to do. Nobody knows what they're going to do when they're older. When I grow up, who knows what I'm going to do? Right. And it shows that you can change throughout life. You're not restricted by age. And that's why I like writing, because you can carry on. I mean, I'm looking to retire when I'm 67 years ahead. Not so long, actually. But it'll be a way of earning and keeping an enjoyment of life and doing something. And I love writing. I love reading. I will always be a reader. If I couldn't write, then I'd still be reading. But if I couldn't read, I think that would be a killer for me. I know when things are really bad with me is if I can't read a book. And when I had my miscarriage, when that started, and I tried to read a book to take my mind off it, I couldn't. When things have gone wrong in the family, for loss, other losses and things, I can't read. I know that is real life impacting, but reading is my escape. And I'm not I watch horror movies, but I don't watch them religiously. I watch what comes out. They don't influence me to a huge extent. The Wicker Man did a bit, because when you talk about 5 Turns and you see, if you watch the Wicker Man, the early one, I will say, I've not watched the remake, but the early one, and they showed the procession through the village. You've got the person as the hobby horse, you've got Punch, you've got Christopher Lee as a man, woman sort of thing. That is supposed to be what people think of as part of quaint rural tradition. But when you look at them, they're not quaint, they're quite monstrous. And if you look at images,
that scene is terrifying. Yeah.
And if you look at some of the photos of similar things that go on today, they can still seem quite scary. There's one, I think it's the Padstow hobby horse, or the Padstow hobby, and I've seen photos of it. It's got this very big disc around it and a painted face, and it is really, really creepy. And then there's also that end scene. There's with the Wicker Man when he's burning in there, and there was. Where we live, there's about 30 odd miles away or so. I probably got the distance wrong. But so he'll do a Wicker Man. They do a May Day sort of thing, and they had a Wicker Man up on the hill, and we went along to that. And you had a lot of folks singing and all dancing, all sorts leading up to it. And then at the end of the night, they burnt this giant wicker effigy, and it is quite something. So little things like that can affect you, and it's the atmosphere that they create that I bring in. And for the movies, I also use a lot of music. If you look at some of the metal videos, Behemoth, they are very good with their videos. they can inspire or feed in more dread than a lot of movies. And people in horror will say, oh, I've watched this, I've watched this, I've watched this, but I'll be going, no, I've listened to this, I've listened to this, I've listened to this, I've watched it. When I was growing up, late 70s, I was in my teens, and I loved Susie and the Banshees music. If you listen to her, she sings about premature burial, all sorts of things. That was on Join Hands. She does her version of the Lord's Prayer, but there's an album called Juju, and it's there's one called Monitor, Voodoo Dolly, and it's the creepiest music, and it's the music that gives you the chill, and I try and bring that into my writing. So with me, yes, I watch horror, yes, I read horror, but music and place and time of day affect me as well. When you're outside and dusk, day is turning to dusk to night, it's that idea of separation, that atmosphere that makes you think there's something more and adds that little chill. When I was growing up in the middle of nowhere, go outside and you'd hear the owl hooting. It was creepy. You know, the pub would be busy during the day and at night, especially in the summer, it would be packed. We're a little rural pub, and you'd get loads of people come over from the West Midlands, from Birmingham and everywhere, so it'd be packed, and then they'd all go and it'd be silent, and you'd hear the owls and you'd see the trees, and it could be quite scary at times. Yeah. You know, it can be creepy, but it's that sense of otherness, something just beyond, you're not quite sure. And that's what I bring into my writing as well. So it's place and music as much as books and films. So again, different, but well, that's me.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the music, because I was actually, when I was exploring your website, I found that page on there, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, because I like that kind of heavy metal music and stuff. And I knew about half the bands, the other half I was like, new bands, new music. So I wanted to ask you, why it was there. And I guess it's the inspiration of it. You listen to it while you write, or those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, lately I've been listening to a lot of my husband, he keeps calling it Viking music, but Wardruna and I can't say it, Heilung, but they do a very pagan type of music, and you listen to that, and it's that sort of vibe that I like to get into the music, and it takes you back to a lot of Norse mythology and prehistory. And when I've done my own family history, I think it's hilarious, but it goes straight back to sort of Viking era, because we found Norman families. If you find a Norman family in your family tree, usually you'll be able to find medieval records and records of that family. If you're sort of common garden farmer, it's very difficult. If you find a Norman family, then you can go back further than the 1500s or wherever the parish records are, and they take you back to Vikings, because Vikings were Normans, they settled that area. So when I put Wardruna on, and they're showing all these, they're showing the glaciers and the forests and the snow and all the bones and everything, I thought, yeah, that's great, that's me. It's just wonderful. They are really good bands, and I would recommend them. I keep looking out to see if they're playing. They kept posting dates in the UK, but then with COVID, it kept getting postponed, so I'm not sure. But they are the bands that I would like to see. I managed to see Slipknot and Behemoth just before COVID. That was back in January, and that was brilliant. I mean, I like both, but I preferred Behemoth at the time, so I went with my eldest. She's a big metal fan. She's got me into a lot of these bands, and I introduced her when she was younger. And I enjoyed Behemoth, but Slipknot live, they were absolutely amazing. I've never seen a crowd like it. I'm not down in the mosh pit, by the way. I'm sat. I can't stand up for a long time.
You're down there. In the middle of it.
It was an eye-opener. I went to Bloodstock a few years back. Well, we've been a few times, but the first time I went, I looked around, and there are all these big blokes, beards, and they're all sat on chairs in between bands. They've all taken their fold-up chairs. It's not very metal. I didn't expect that at all. So we take our fold-up chairs now as well and sit there between the bands. But I like a lot of industrial metal. I like some death metal. I'm open. I'm always looking for something new, and my eldest will introduce me to new things. All my kids do. They always say, "Mum, you should listen to that," and I do, and I'll find something, and they'll listen to it as well. Music. I'd say the musical ability is in the children, not in me, and that comes from the Welsh side, not my side. So they introduce me to a lot of things. It keeps you young. I think music keeps you young.
Awesome. Very cool.
I just love the idea of you going to like Slipknot.
And I've been to I've seen Rammstein. I'm 56 now. I have to think about my ages. I will be 57 this year. My eldest got me a ticket to see Nine Inch Nails for my 50th birthday. We had seen them. We saw them at Reading, but it was very annoying because they were miffed with the people who did the festival for some reason. So they just played their set and that was it. But there's also this dopey woman waving her arms around in front of us, and there's a bloke with it. And they spent half their time talking and chatting each other up, and we're trying to listen to the music. And I just said, shut up and listen. But you know, so I've seen quite a few bands. Ghost we saw, Sabaton, Apocalyptica. And there's a lot more I want to see. Three Teeth I was listening to a lot last year, industrial metal, and they were coming over to the UK, and then that got cancelled as well. I was annoyed that StokerCon got cancelled because that was coming to the UK for the first time. It's now going to be ChillerCon, so I'm going to that. Are you going to that, Janine?
I don't know. I'm undecided.
Yeah, well, if you do, I'll be there. So at least that's happened. But Slipknot were going to do Knotfest in the UK for the first time as well, and that got cancelled. So things have got cancelled, but things to look forward to again as well. So if it's metal, I'll usually be there. Not in the mosh pit. I think I remember going to Reading and I went to see. I went into a tent. I think it was Heaven's Basement were performing. And my son came in with me and I looked at him and he said, "Oh, I'm protecting you from the mosh pit, Mum." So he goes in. But then later on, Gojira were in another tent and I went in to see them, but everybody else stayed outside. So I went in there on my own. But again, I'm quite safe on the corner. But I'll say with metal festivals and the metal community, it's like the horror community. They don't judge. No. You can go into a festival and you see all these people tattooed, all in black or whatever. I mean, I'm not tattooed. My kids have one or two. One of them has a few. But it doesn't matter what you look like. They accept you. And that's the same with the horror community. With everything else you see around, I'll say this about the Reading Festival. There's a certain element of posing and people looking at each other and judging, but you don't get that at the metal festivals. And I've not seen it in the horror community either. I think because we're probably such a strange lot anyway that any other person is a bit strange. You won't make it, you won't notice.
Oh, definitely. Okay, all this music talks actually led us quite nicely into the next question, because we've got, in addition to prose, you're also a poet. So what is it like versus poetry versus prose? Do you approach them differently in terms of ideas and content?
Not necessarily content. Sometimes I do. Poetry for me is fun. I treat it like a puzzle. It's like trying to create a feeling or an image within as few words as possible. And when you can do it within a few words and create an effect, it's like, a wow moment. There's something online called Visual Verse, and they always put up a picture on the first of each month and you write a poem in response to that. And to me, that's my writing exercise. I would recommend poetry to anyone actually as a writer, to create imagery and emotion, because it does help tighten up your writing, a bit like flash fiction does, which I used to do a lot of, not so much anymore. I do like to write dark poetry. I've got into the HWA Poetry Showcase for the past couple of years, and I've got a little collection out as well. Yesterday I nursery rhymes. I twisted those. I had a number that I published before, but I wanted to do a more complete collection. So I took those, and nursery rhymes are quite dark anyway. When you think about Three Blind Mice with a carving knife, you can't be much darker than that. But I tried, I managed. And it took me a while to think about Humpty, but I've got 60 verses and I published that yesterday. But that for me is not, hey, look at this, I want you all to buy it. Yes, it'd be nice if you do. That is my sort of happy place. It's a bit of fun and a bit of enjoyment. And with the more serious dark poetry, it's like trying to just convey a story or a dark emotion in that. It is a little bit more different than the prose. It is much more of an exercise. It is much more about word choice and finding words. And I think not just in tightening, but it helps you develop your vocabulary, because you're trying to find different ways of saying things and not the way that everybody else does. So just as an exercise, even if you think, oh, I can't write poetry, I don't always call it poetry, I call it verse at times. Just have a go, even if it's just for yourself, because then you will find ways of saying things that can feed back into your book. Add another layer of imagery in there. One thing people will often say about my writing is they say they like the atmosphere or the word setting, and that, or the world setting, I should say, and that comes, I think, a lot from the poetry and the thought that I've given to the words in that. So I would recommend it. But it is very much what I call my fun. It's a fun thing to do. It's my happy place, and it's quick. When you're writing novels, well, that takes months. Even when you've done it and sent it out, that takes months again. I'm still waiting on decisions on some things months later. I've mentioned lately online that there's a book that I sent out. It's To the Tor Night Fire, open call, which was last year for a week in June. They're doing another week this year. And I sent it in and I got it in early. So I thought, yes, I'm fairly high in the queue. It's going to get through quickly. And I waited and waited, and it went from number 9 to number 6. And then a few months back, it went to number 3. A couple of weeks ago, it's number 2. And this is 8 months on. And I look, I'm getting obsessive. I keep looking, and it's number 2, number 2. I think, don't they like it then? When it says, what does this mean? It could be it's not been read, or someone else has read it and they're just waiting. I'm hoping they might be waiting, but if they don't like it, well, we'll see.
Sure.
I sent it to Ken at Silver Shamrock anyway. He might want it. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I got to back up just really quickly. So you said you wrote a collection of poems based on nursery rhymes. Is that what you said earlier?
Yes.
I had that idea. I wanted to do that as well, because I was reading this old book of nursery rhymes that I don't even know where I got it from, like a thrift store or something like that. And I read a few to my kids, and I'm just like, what is going on with these? They're so dark and weird and disturbing. I'm like, there's so many good ideas, like your story or poem ideas. So I love that you did that.
There are still some left. When I wrote them, I put them out as part of Dark as My Playground, which has some poetry, dark verse in there, as well as the nursery rhymes. But I wanted to do a proper collection on its own. And I'd mentioned it before, and then I started to panic because I thought other people might do it. So I wanted to and I'd mentioned that I was working on these, and I thought, I've mentioned it a few times now. I need to work on it, get it out there before somebody else does it. Yeah. So I've got about 60 rhymes in there. But if you look at Mother Goose online, there's supposed to be over 100 nursery rhymes. So there's still 40 odd for you to do.
All right, I'm on it. I got this.
Get on it. Get on it quickly.
Yeah. You said this just came out, this collection?
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah, it's called 1, 2, I See You. And so, it's got about 60 rhymes in there. Some of them that have been out before. If you want me to read one, I'll read one now. But
yeah, go for it. Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
It's one that was actually in that was published before, but it'll be in 1, 2. So it's live as Kindle, but I'm waiting for the paperback at the minute. And it's called Tommy Tucker's Swan Song. So this is about Tommy Tucker. I don't know whether, do you know Tommy Tucker in America?
I'm not familiar. It's not ringing a bell, but maybe when I hear this, it will. Okay.
Right. Are you sitting comfortably, children? Good. Then I'll begin. It's like Jack and Nori. I don't think you're too young for that to me. Right. I no longer sing for my supper, my breakfast, my dinner, my tea. You may have heard of me. I'm Tommy Tucker, and the bell is tolling for me. The last time I sang for my supper, my wife gave me only brown bread. So I sharpened the blade of my trusty knife, and now my wife lies dead. As I sit and eat my last supper, The gallows calls my name loud, shouts, "Are you there, Tommy Tucker? You must put on a show for the crowd." I finished the last of my supper, walk the steps that lead to my end, see the noose waiting there empty, longing to make me its friend. See me swing, see me, Tommy Tucker, see me dance to the hangman's tune, sent to hell by brown bread and butter, and the devil will dine on me soon.
I love that. That is amazing.
It's just such fun. It's wonderful. I mean, I've turned Humpty Dumpty. I didn't do Humpty in there, and that's what stopped me carrying on with the collection, was because I couldn't think of anything to do with Humpty Dumpty, and I thought you can't do a nursery collection without Humpty Dumpty. But I came up with one for him the other day, and he is a grave robber. He's with the Resurrection Man. So there you go. So I'd cracked Humpty and put him in, and there we are.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. See, if I was trying to do something like that, and I don't, poetry's really hard for me anyway, but I would just have to do things like the Roald Dahl's revolting rhymes.
Oh, I love those.
It would end up being really silly like that if I tried. But that was cool. Right, Ben, you've got a challenge now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so change it here a little bit. Who are some of your favorite writers, and how have they influenced your own writing?
Charles Dickens, as I mentioned earlier.
Right.
I started reading him 11 to 12. Terry Pratchett, I love his Discworld series. I think he is a wonderful writer. I know it was in the past tense now, but his writing is just fantastic, and to write to that comedic effect and make it sound so easy is brilliant. I've got Adam Neville. I like John, I could never say his name, John V.B. Lindqvist. He wrote Let the Right One In, Harbour, things like that. So I really like his stuff. I like anything and everything, really. I started reading Grady Hendrix for the first time last year. I loved his horror store with the whole IKEA layout, and the Southern Vampire one as well. That was brilliant. So I read his. So at the minute, it's anything and everything. Yes, I read Stephen King. My older sister actually was the one who collected all his works, and I'd read some of it, but not all of it. And then she needed to make space in her house and asked me if I wanted her books. So I took those, and I've read most of them now. So I do like his work, not all of it. Some of it I've gone, but he's still a brilliant writer in terms of creating a town or a place or people, and you're just there. He makes that so easy. If I wrote about it, people would be saying, "This is boring, you've slowed it down, why are you writing about this walk to the supermarket," whatever. But if it was Stephen King doing it, it's totally different. It's adding a layer to whatever else is going on. So he's very good that way. I'm not so sure. If I think about influences, I don't particularly follow a style, but having thought about it over again the past few days, when I talk, this is going to sound strange, when I talk about Dickens, he has these dark characters and these dark sides of the human soul in his stories. Yes, there's a lot of melodrama, and some of his female characters are very, what I would call drippy. I just kidding, get a grip. But I do like his villains. And I think maybe that has unconsciously influenced the way I write my characters. It may be that Tommy, Betty and Fiddler come from that sort of era when I like that sort of writing. I like crime. I like a lot of Scandi noir, but I'll just read that. I'm reading Jonathan Mabry's Ink at the moment. I hadn't really read much of his stuff before. I'd read Rot and Ruin because I got that into the school library when I was working. I've given that up recently. I was buying a lot of books from the sort of indie area and putting those on the bookshelves. So you'll find the Rust Maidens in there. You'll find Jonathan Mabry. You'll find Found in the Cornfield, Adam. I can't say his name. That's in there with a T+, I will say. But I was buying these books and then putting them up there. But yeah, I'd say I've read a lot, and but there are favourites that I will go to. But as soon as I find a new author that I like, then I keep buying their stuff. As I say, it was Grady Hendrix. Before that, it was Adam Neville, John Lindqvist. I still can't say his name, but there's a lot up there. And there's also, I'm going to say, the women writers. I like T.C. Parker. She's come on the scene recently, and we've been in touch a lot. There is someone else I've written down, but I can't remember who it was, which is going to be really bad. I'm going to look at my notes because I'm of a certain age. I don't care if people mock me.
If I didn't have my notes, I wouldn't have a clue what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I can't read my writing now, so this is really good. Oh, here we go. Laurel Hightower. That's it.
Laurel!
Yeah. Yes. I loved, when I read Whispers in the Dark, it had a real thriller feel to it. Yeah. And I thought, you shouldn't think like this, but you think it's a man writing at first. You think this is as good as any man, but we shouldn't think like that. We shouldn't automatically assume that because of the way it's being written, it's by a man. I read that and I thought, yeah, this is really good. And then I read her Crossroads. So that was excellent. So I would highly recommend her. T.C. Parker, I've read Blood, Salt, and Salt, Blood even, and The Test of Feathers. And I've also been reading her crime series, which is very, very good. So she is someone to watch. Alison Faye, I like her shorts. Then there is poetry. You've got Cynthia Palaio, Stephanie Whiterich, Sarah Tantlinger. And I was reading her Cradleland of Parasites the other day, which is very good. And I actually heard her on a podcast the other day. I can't remember who it was, but she said she came to writing later and said it doesn't matter how old you are because she was 37 or something. I thought, you're still young. I'm old. But with the women, you can't just say lots of their names because they haven't had the time to build up that body of work yet. At the minute, I'm finding a lot of women writers that I'm enjoying, but they've only written a few short stories, and so you have to dig around to find them. What I'm looking forward to is the day that you can say, like you do for Shirley Jackson, she's got a whole body of work. So yeah, I like this person, and then point to all their books on the shelves, but we haven't got to that point yet. Yes, we're getting on the shelves more. Yes, there are more women in horror, but you do not see those range of books by a particular female author yet. And I think once we start seeing that, then we'll know that we've actually made a difference and we've got somewhere. At the minute, it's great that we're more in the anthologies and we're doing all these things, but it's that body of work that other people will see and respect as equal to any that any men may read. And then we can treat each other as equals and not say, oh, it's because it's written by a man, it's got there, or because it was written by a woman. I hate labels. I hate labels of any sort. We started the Black Angel Press with Ali Faye recently, and that's like a project thing where we're trying to boost female writers who maybe haven't been published before, and we'll help get them out there. It's something separate to my novels and novellas, which I'll be doing through Silver Shamrock. But we shouldn't have to do that, and I don't like it that in a way we have to say, oh, we're a women press or I mean, for those who identify as women as well, and you've got all these labels, whether it's gender or race. At the minute, I think we maybe need them to help give people a boost and get us all up there. And I will say on age as well, because I keep seeing images, when I see women writers online, they've all got glamorous images. And then there's me getting older and grayer. And I think, I'm not that. Will I fit in there? And I know that a lot of other older people, maybe not just women, but they think it's a young person's game. Or if people talk about new writers, they talk about young new writers. They don't realise that sometimes you don't get to writing until you're older. So new writers should be young or old.
Yep.
Any colour, any gender. And in the end, it'll just be down to the work. But we're not there yet. So we will still need these labels to boost each other. But I do look forward to the day when we can get rid of all that and just all accept each other as we are and just see what great work everybody can produce without having to say, oh, you got in there because of a quote, or you got there because of this. Because I've been spoken to, when I was a technical author for a number of years, and I was introduced by the boss to clients as the token female, and I hated that, and I had to work. I proved myself in the job. I became a project manager there, and some of the men I was working with did not like it that I ended up leading these teams, but I was still not getting the same pay. But it's all, you know, if you're a woman in certain industries, they say, oh, she's got this because she did that, or she said this, or it's a quota. Never anything about the work. And it can, I think that can impact other groups now as well, to their detriment, even if they're doing brilliant work. So I'll be glad when quotas can be done away with as well, and we are all equal, because I really can't stand it. But I just want everybody. I'm one of these. There's a lot of people out there who likes everybody else. You know, we're nice people. We want everybody to be the best they can, to get the same chances, and you need a level playing field. And that is not the case in so many aspects of life. It's tough out there. So labels will stay for a while, and say with Black Angel, it's female centric. So if you're people who identify as women, then yes, that's a place. But ultimately, I want to get rid of those labels. I don't like it. We're humans, and that's the only label that we actually need, I think. Oh, end of the lecture.
Okay, I'm seeing that we're just over the hour mark, so we'll try and whiz through these questions, because I know you're so much in demand, Steph, that you've got another interview coming up after this. So.
Yeah, that's an anthology which will be out in September. I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, but we're going to talk on. We're having a little gathering to see because it's in a shared world. So I've had to write a story set in somebody else's somebody else's world that they've created, and I've already done it. They said it was a bit brutal, but there you go. It's good fun, actually, trying to fit your ideas into somebody else's world and all the things that they've created. It gives you a little bit more structure that you don't normally have. So yes, I pantsed my way through it again, but I brought those other threads in as well.
Can you, before we let you go, can you tell us a little bit about the horror tree and your specific part of it, with the trembling with fear and that kind of thing?
That's with Stuart Conover. He'll probably tell me off for saying the name wrong. He is the owner and editor and does all the stuff at Horror Tree. Trembling with Fear is their online zine. It's a flash market. We do Drabbles and Short Flash every Sunday. I do the draft on the Wednesday, do the editorial. So it's week in, week out, year in, year out for anybody to send in. And I do the acknowledgements, I do the first pass of reading, pass them on to Stuart, then trigger the contract, do all that sort of thing. There's a lot of admin that goes on behind the scenes. And we publish anthologies as well for all the previous years. So at the minute, we've gathered the whole year's output and put that together. I also do on Fridays the Indie Bookshelf, which is a roundup of any books and things that are coming up for publication in the next few months. We put that on there. That started as a pandemic response, but we've kept it going and we'll carry on that going. So it's a bit of free marketing. So anyone who's got a book that they want out, just drop us a line and we'll put the book there and a link, and people can get to that. I do a lot of admin bits behind the scenes as well. It's all voluntary. I got into it because Stuart, I published a Drabble, and then he gave a shout out that he was looking for someone to help. And I'd got several submissions accepted via the calls that he hosts on the Horror Tree site, because they host the calls from various publications. If you've got an anthology or you're a publisher who wants novels sent in or whatever, he will host those calls. So if you don't know where to send your stories, go to the Horror Tree and have a look, and you will find a market there. And he was looking for someone to help out because of the workload, and it's a way of giving back. So I got stuck in, and there I am 3-4 years later.
Very cool. It seems like a really cool site, and a lot of cool work that you're doing over there.
He does, I will say, he does do a lot. I don't know how he does it, because he's got a young family. He's got a very intensive job, from what I can gather. I used to tell I'd get everything sorted at Horatory, get everything cleared and up to date, and then I'd see a tweet or something that he was on the train. This was pre-COVID. When he's on the train, I know he's creating work for me to do. So I'd go back there. But he does do a lot of work. He's put a lot of his own money into it. I know he's got a Patreon for it now, and people are supporting him via Patreon, because I know at one point a few years back he was looking at maybe giving it up because of the financial commitment and stress and everything else, but he's got more support financially. There's me there helping. You've got Kathy Jordan, who's the review coordinator, so if anyone's got a book that they want reviewed, send it in, direct it to her, and she'll get it out for review. And there's interviews. We are looking for someone to help out on Trembling with Fear at the minute. We built it up so that we would do serials and Unholy Trinities. The Trinities are collections of 3 linked travels, and we'd also do specials, summer, Valentine and Halloween, and Christmas. And it became a lot of work. So we managed to get an editor in last year to take on, I think just over a year, to take that on board, but they've stepped down. So at the moment I'm going back through and picking up everything that's coming in for Trembling with Fear. But if anybody wants to come in and help and pick up that side of things, that would be brilliant. It is a lot of work. As I say, it is voluntary. It is week in, week out, and you'll be dipping into the emails to see what's come in more than twice a week. I'm usually checking in 3 or 4 times a week, several hours a week, if not more at times. At the minute, a lot of that is because of the anthology. Stuart, I don't know how many hours he puts in, but an awful lot. And he's also tweeted, he's doing an MBA as well as everything else that's going on in his life. So I don't know how he fits it all in. But it's a resource for authors. It's free if you want to do a guest post, if you want to do an interview, if you want to push your own book. If you're looking for a submission call, go there. If you want to support him on Patreon, also that would be brilliant as well, because what he's done is it's given a lot to the community. So I couldn't give money at the time, so I gave my time. I did do a little bit of Patreons with a number of authors and things recently when I was working as a way of giving back, but again I've had to haul that back in while I'm in the middle of move mode and finding out whether I've got 2 pennies to rub together. Well, I don't know what I've got coming in at the minute, so I've had to haul back on that. But if I say anybody cares to support him, then feel free to do so. It'd be greatly appreciated.
And we'll make sure that we put all the links to the different things down on the underneath the video, all that professional stuff.
Definitely. All right, so Alice, you've got 5 Turns of the Wheel coming out from Silver Shamrock. You've got some other cool things, sounds like, coming out as well that we are very excited about. Can you tell people where, if they want to go to find more about you or find you online, where should they go?
Okay, I'm on Twitter at @Stevie. Makes me sound a bit like a matador, but that's what Twitter came up with. Stevie is actually what my family call me. My mum and dad never call me Stephanie unless I was being told off. I was always Stevie when I was little, and my sisters and their kids call me Stevie, but nobody else in the world calls me Stevie except that bit of the family and Twitter. And then I've got a blog at stephanieellis.org, I think it is.
Very good.
And that's where I am on Facebook, but I'm not there so much. I prefer Twitter. I think for books, I think Twitter, I know everybody has their different opinions, but Twitter is a good place to be. And if you only respond to various things, it means that a lot of the rubbish that people go on about is filtered out. And then you'll only find that if you click on something trending. And I try to avoid to do that, because every time I do that, I'm growling. And I think, no, I shouldn't have done that. That's really bad. So I stay in my own little corner of Twitter, where there's this lovely little American group they adopted me when COVID happened. Steve Vassallo, he's on there, and he created this apocalyptic, this little check-in each day, and I've been adopted by them, and we still carry on checking in with each other, and they just fill up the feed with gifts and all sorts of things, and so I can never find what anybody's tweeted about. So it's either cats or snow at the moment. but I'm working, actually, I will give him a plug. I'm working with him and Max Stark. If you see Max on Twitter, he's done a lot of artwork. He does a lot of profiles, double exposures, where you'll have a face with various bits of nature around. And we're doing a combination. There's Steve and me writing some poetry and Max doing some pictures, and we're hoping to get that out. It's not horror poetry, by the way. It's very much nature and myths and folklore, that side of it. So it's a project that we're working on. And so, yeah, but check Max's artwork out as well. And send him books, because he says that because he's in Mexico, he can never get books.
Oh, bless him. Okay, well, I think that's all that we wanted to cover, Ben, isn't it? Are we all done?
Yeah, that's all for me. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just before we wrap up, Steph, was there anything that we haven't covered that you just want to get out there, or are you happy that we
well,
things?
I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to say this, because I signed the contract the other day, but Ken hasn't done one of these announcement things that he normally does. So I'm going to say it now anyway. So I signed a contract with Silver Shamrock the other day for 3 years for 2 books each year, a novel and a novella. And he's given me dates. I think the first dates are next year. But here's a classic mistake I made. When he took on 5 turns, he said, oh, by the way, have you got any other novels? I said, yes, I've got, I think it's 3 others, not the one that I sent to Tor, but 3 others. So I thought I'd sent them. I filled in my spreadsheet saying I'd sent them. And I've been waiting all this time. And then when he talked to me the other day about contract and what I was doing, and I said, oh yeah, I'd love to, but any decisions on the books I sent you? And he goes, oh, have I missed something? And he checked his emails and I checked mine. And although I filled in the spreadsheet, I must have got distracted because I hadn't actually sent them. So I sent them now. And it's not the first time, because when I sent Bottled Out, I sent Bottled Out to another submission call. I can't remember, Hellbound or Bloodshot or something. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And some months later, the person who's doing it, he said, oh, if you haven't heard by now, just check in. So I emailed and they went, no, not received it. So I checked my emails, and the email address, I'd got 1 letter wrong. So I don't know who got my book. Some strange person got my book. So, yeah, brain fog. So you wait, it's bad enough that you have to wait. But when you're waiting for something that you think you've done, and you haven't actually done it, no. So always double check, yeah, and don't fill in your spreadsheets until you've actually set it up. That's the other thing. So yeah, that's the big thing that I've done. I've got there's an anthology, Far Off Adventures, I think it's called, with Samantha Kolesnik, Off Limits Press.
Yes.
That one.
Yes.
I've got another one that's coming out at some point. There's 2 I can't say anything. And then I've got 3 that I know I'm in the final consideration for. And this, again, it's the waiting and the waiting and the waiting. Next time you see me, I'll probably be sat on the sofa. I'll be a skeleton, but there.
Well, awesome. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and congratulations, especially on the Silver Shamrock announcement. That is fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And good luck for everything that you're waiting for. I'm sure that it's going to be a yes for everything. I can feel it in my bones.
Feel it in your water. Okay. Lovely to speak to you both. Okay,
and thank you ever so much. Take care. Bye.
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 Bye.